Math 3, Unit 5, Section 9. This one's on solving and graphing radical equations. Okay? You will notice we have an equation here where you have a radical equaling x. When it says solve algebraically, we want to solve this for x. Okay? So we're just going to go ahead and take that equation, the square root of x plus 2 equals x, and we want to solve for x. What would I do in order to solve this for x? Good. Square both sides is correct. So when we square a square root, it just becomes itself. So this will be x plus 2 equals x squared. When we have an x squared term, what do we know? In order to solve for x, what are we going to have to do? Yeah. Very good. Set it equal to 0, and then x squared needs to be positive. So that means I'm going to move all of this stuff on the left to the right. So minus x minus 2, minus x minus 2. These eliminate, and we end up with x squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. At this point now, we need to factor. And so my multiplication number is, and my adding number is, and can I use a shortcut on this one? Yes. So what numbers are going to work? Perfect. Negative 2 and positive 1 multiply to be negative 2, and they add to be negative 1. So when we factor them, we are going to have x minus 2 and x plus 1 equals 0. Now, when you solve that, what does x equal? 2 and negative 1. Okay, now here's the thing, is that more often than not, there's only going to be one answer. Okay, and the reason is because, first of all, a square root cannot equal a negative number. If you take the square root of something here, it will not equal negative. So just looking at that and knowing that, what answer do you think is not going to work? Negative 1. And let's go ahead. So I know negative 1 is not going to work for sure, but let's go ahead and check 2 and just make sure. So on all these problems, when you're solving algebraically, you always want to check your answers, okay? And so we're just going to check 2. So we have the square root of 2 plus 2. And does that equal 2? Well, what is the square root of 2 plus 2? 4. And does the square root of 4 equal 2? So we know it checks out. So the answer to this problem is x equals 2. Now we're going to look at it graphically. Okay? So graphically, we are going to graph f of x equals the square root of x plus 2, and g of x equals x. So on here, f of x equals the square root of x plus 2. Where is my vertex? Very good. Negative 2, 0. So left 2, up 0. And we know this would be curving which direction? Positive. It'd curve up and right, correct? Is it gonna, we already have an x-intercept. It'll probably have a y-intercept. So I would suggest maybe go ahead and find the y-intercept. So if I were doing that, I would have y equals the square root of 0 plus 2. So that's just the square root of 2. And in your calculator, if you were to take the square root of 2, what do you get? Approximately like 1.4. Okay. So something like right about there. So we're going to go ahead and just draw this. I didn't draw that great, but our curve kind of like that. Okay, this line right here, and I'm going to use a different color, is just y equals x. So what is your starting point there? 0, 0. So here's a point at 0, 0. And then what would be your slope?
1 over 1.
1 over 1. And so from here, we're going up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1, and so on. Now, do you see how, if you drew this better than me, and I can hand out note cards if you want to, or you can get rulers. But they intersect right here. what value of x is it where they intersect?
3.
2. So if you look right here, you see it? The x value where these intersect is at 2. What do you notice about the intersection value and the value algebraically? They are the same. Okay? So we're showing it algebraically and graphically. And it works the same. Good. Okay. So that one took a lot of time. We're going to spend less time on the next one. Okay. So let's solve it algebraically first. So we're going to rewrite this. We have negative root x plus 1 equals x plus 1. What do I do? Square both sides. Very good. So we square both sides. When you square negative, what does it become? Positive, and then we square square root, and that becomes x plus 1. When you have x plus 1 squared, what should you do?
Write another one.
You want to write another one out. So that really means x plus 1 times x plus 1. Now, you guys can distribute the whole thing if that makes sense to you. I know how to multiply this in my head. Okay? So, x squared, my middle term I know is going to be a plain x, and I add those two numbers together. 1 plus 1 equals 2x. So plus 2x. And my last term I know is where I multiply those two numbers together, and 1 times 1 makes 1. That is how I do it in my head. But it only works if the coefficients are 1. Okay, in front of the x's if they're 1s. Or you can distribute and find the same answer. What will I do now?
Subtract x.
Good. Subtract x and subtract 1. Okay, these eliminate. We get x squared plus x, and these also eliminate, and we set this equal to 0. Your equal to 0 can be on either side of the equation. It doesn't matter. What would you do to factor this one?
Pull out a GCF.
A GCF. Very good. And what is my GCF here? X, and I'm left with x plus 1, because when you divide each of these by x, x divided by x is 1. Okay, equals 0. And so what are my values for x? 0 and negative 1. We have to check them. This one's not as obvious as the other one, because when I plug in negative 1 here, I get a 0. When I plug in 0, I get a 1. And so we just need to go through and check it. Okay? So, check. I'm going to start plugging in 0 into this equation and seeing if it works. So, we have negative square root of 0 plus 1 equals 0 plus 1. Okay, 0 plus 1 is what? 1. And what is the square root of 1? 1. But there's a negative in front. Do you guys see that?
Yeah.
So this is saying negative 1 equals 1. Is that true?
Never.
No. So 0's out. So we are pretty sure that negative 1 works, but we should still check it. Okay? So we have negative square root of negative 1 plus 1 equals negative 1 plus 1. And again, we're not sure, so we do our question mark. Negative 1 plus 1 is 0, and there's no such thing as a negative 0, and so that's just 0, equals, and negative 1 plus 1 is 0. So that checks out. So my answer is x equals negative 1. Without making the graph, what do you think my answer is going to be over here?
Negative 1.
You guys are so smart. Okay, so now we're going to graph it. What is my vertex for this equation right here? Negative 1, 0. Negative 1, 0. Which way is this going to curve?
Downward.
Downward. Okay, is it going to hit the y-axis?
No.
Yes. So we're going to find our y-intercept. We already have our x-intercept. My y-intercept, we're going to get y equals negative square root of 0 plus 1. What is 0 plus 1? 1. So my y-intercept is at what? Negative 1. 0 plus 1 makes that 1. Square root of 1 is 1, so we have negative 1. Bless you.
0 bless your heart.
Okay. Now, over here, we have y equals x plus 1. What would be my starting point?
1, 0.
Nope.
Negative 1.
Nope.
0, 1.
0, 1. Because there's nothing in parentheses with the x, so the x value is 0, and then the number added at the end, that's always your y, so it's 0, 1. So 0 up 1, and then what is my slope? 1. So up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1, and I went down 1, left 1. Do you see how they're going to end up intersecting right there? So we can draw our line. And you can see right here, that's where they touch. X value is at negative 1. Okay. The last part here is instead of doing both the graph and solving algebraically, we are just going to solve it algebraically. And when they say check for extraneous solutions, remember that's just always plugging our answers in to make sure that they work. Okay, so I'm going to pull sticks on this one for you to help me solve these problems. So starting with the first one on the left, tell me what you think the first step will be. Jenny. So we're right up here. We want to get the root by itself. What will I do first? Perfect. Add 1 to both sides is correct. So now I have 1/4 root x plus 11 equals 2. Okay, what would I do next, Matt? Good. You could square both sides. Now, for me, I would prefer to multiply both sides by 4 in order to get rid of the fraction. But you could do it either way. You'll end up with the same answer. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and multiply by 4 to both sides just so that it eliminates that fraction there. And so I have the square root of x plus 11 equals 8. Okay, next step is to do what, Samir? Very good. Square both sides is correct. So we square both sides. When we square a square root, it just becomes x plus 11. And 8 squared is 64. So the last thing I'm going to do now to get x by itself is, very good. And we get x equals 53. Perfect. What should we do with that answer? Very good. Check it. So our check. 1/4 root 53 plus 11 minus 1 should equal 1. 53 plus 11 is what?
64.
64. What's the square root of 64? 8. 1/4 times 8 minus 1. 2 minus 1, and does that equal 1?
Yes.
So it checks out. We are good. X equals 53 is my answer. Okay, second problem. We're going to go to the right. I'm going to pull sticks for you to help me do this. Okay, so first step, what am I going to do, Jonathan? Perfect. Subtract 4 is correct. 5 cubed root of x minus 1 equals 10. Next step, what will I do? Ning. Perfect. Divide by 5 is correct. Cubed root of x minus 1 equals 2. Next step, what will you do, Taylor C? Very good. So since it's a cubed root, we have to cube both sides. So when you cube a cube root, it just becomes what's inside. And what is 2 cubed? Perfect. And then our last step here is going to add 1 to both sides. And so x equals what? 9. Okay, but in order to make sure this is a true answer, I need to, very good, check it. Okay, so 5, and then we have the cubed root of 9 minus 1 plus 4, and we're checking to see, is this equal to 14? What is 9 minus 1? 8. What is the cubed root of 8? 2. So we have 5 times 2 plus 4 is 10 plus 4, 14. Good. So it checks out, and we know that x equals 9 is the answer. Okay. Okay, look at this one in your groups. State what you think you would do first on this. Okay, so I'm going to pull a stick and tell me what your group decided would be the best thing for you to do. Anthony. Did your group not talk? You guys don't know? Okay, Lily, what? Square both sides. Okay. So, when we square both sides, Anthony, can you answer this question? What would I need to make sure that I do? Yeah, well, that you have to square everything, right? And so that means that I would write this as what? 3 squared is 9 times 5x plus 1, because that would eliminate that square root. And then on the right side, Anthony, what would I end up with? 16 times 3x. Does anybody have questions on that? We're okay? All right, so what is going to be our next step now? Cole's not here. Albert. What's my next step? Distribute is correct. So we're going to distribute. 9 times 5x is 45x. 9 times 1 is 9. We distribute this 16. And 16 times 3x is 48x. 16 times 3 is 48. Okay. Next step, anybody, is to do what? Good. Subtract 45x to both sides. We do that. We get 9 equals 3x. And we divide by 3 to both sides, and x equals 3. Okay, but we always need to check. So our check here, we have 3 root 5 times 3 plus 1, and we want to see, does that equal 4 times root 3 times 3? What's 15, or sorry, what's 5 times 3? 15, and 15 plus 1 is, so this is 3 root 16, but we know the square root of 16 is 4, and so we have 3 times 4, which is 12. Over here, this makes a pair of 3's, or 9. What's the square root of 9? 3, so we have 4 times 3, which is 12, and it checks out. Okay, last problem, and this one is more complicated. Okay. There are multiple ways of doing this one. The easiest thing to start off with is trying to get the root by itself. So I'm going to subtract 2x to both sides. When I do that, I get negative 5 root x equals 3 minus 2x. Now, if I divide by negative 5 to both sides, what's going to happen? Fraction. So do I want to do that? No. So we're going to square both sides. Good. You guys are thinking. I like it. Okay. So when I square negative 5, what does that become? 25. And when I square root x, that becomes x. So the left side, we get 25x. Is everybody good with that? Yeah. And then what am I going to do with this? Write it out twice. Okay, I'm going to kind of do this one to the side. This one, there's a number in front of the x, so I can't do a shortcut method. There actually is a shortcut method, but I'm not going to tell you. Okay. 3 times 3 is what? 9. 3 times negative 2x? Negative 6x. Negative 2x times 3 is negative 6x, and then negative 2x times negative 2x makes a positive 4x squared. Now, when I write this, I'm going to write it in descending order. So how will I write it right here?
4x squared is negative 12x plus 9.
Perfect. Now what? Subtract 25x to both sides so that it's set equal to 0. This cancels. We get 4x squared minus 37x plus 9 equals 0. Now we are going to factor. Can I use my shortcut? No. So 4 times 9, my multiplication number is what?
36.
And my adding number is?
Negative 37.
So what numbers are going to work?
Negative 36 and negative 1.
Negative 36, negative 1. Do those add to be negative 37?
Yeah.
Do they multiply to be a positive 36? So we did it right. So how do I write this out? 4x squared
Minus 36
minus 36x.
minus x plus
So do you guys remember that? So all we're doing is changing that negative 37x into these two pieces right there, the negative 36x and the negative 1x, and then the front and end terms stay the same. Okay, what do you do at this point now? Factor. Okay, what is the GCF of the first group?
4x.
And we're left with? Good. What's the GCF of the second group? Negative 1, and we're left with? And we notice that these are the same. And so that means we get? Good. 4x minus 1 and x minus 9. The order doesn't matter. And when you set those equal to 0, what does x equal?
9 and
9 and 1/4. Okay. I'm not going to box this around here. I'm going to circle it so I don't lose it. But we need to what?
check.
Check it. Okay. So, checking it. I'm going to plug in 9 first. 2 times 9 minus 5 root 9 equals 3. Shh. What's 2 times 9? 18. Minus, what's the square root of 9?
3.
3. What's negative 5 times 3?
Negative 15.
Does that equal 3?
Yes.
Okay, I'm pretty sure 9's the answer. We could check 1/4. Do we want to check it?
No.
X equals 9 is correct.
Wait, why don't we check it?
You should. We just don't want to. I'll check it though for some of you.
No, I don't want you to.
Okay.
I was just
Any other questions?